Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and we've got a fun one today, some retro-inspired game controllers from Retro Fighters. And the twist with these is that they also work with the consoles that they kind of look like. So for example, this one here is a Dreamcast controller called the D6. Now it'll work on your Nintendo Switch, it'll work on the PC. It's also direct input and X input compatible, so just about anything else that supports one of those two game controller standards will work with it as well, including the Mister and the Raspberry Pi. And this is a great 6-button Sega layout controller. It feels really nice in the hand, and we'll dig into it in a little bit. But you also get a dongle in each of the boxes that accompany the controllers to plug it in to the original console. So for example, the D6 comes with this dongle that lets you pop a VMU in here, and you've got yourself a wireless Dreamcast controller. And they've got dongles for the Gamecube here with their BattlerGC Pro, and the Xbox Hunter controller here also has a dongle for the original Xbox consoles. And we're going to take a look at each of these in this video. And I do want to let you know, in the interest of full disclosure, that these came in free of charge from Retro Fighters. However, they did not review or approve what you're about to see before it was uploaded. No other compensation was received, and all opinions are my own. So let's get into it now and see how these game controllers work, starting with the Dreamcast one. Now the price point on the Dreamcast controller here along with the Xbox controller are about 50 bucks. You get with both of them the modern dongle along with the retro dongle, so everything you need is in the box, no additional accessories necessary. The Gamecube controller also has its modern and retro dongles in the box, and this one's a little bit more at $60, and I've got links to everything in the video description as to where you can find them. Now this D6 is not yet released at the time I'm recording this video, but it will be out, I believe, in a month or two. It feels really nice in the hand here. It's got a very good weight to it. It's very balanced. I really like the buttons. They have Kale mechanical switches in here. That includes the bumpers here on the top, along with all the buttons, and even the D-pad have mechanical switches. So the thing is constantly clicking here as you are playing with it. You get a very nice sense of actuation. It's very good for shooters and fighting games because the buttons have good travel, but they spring back very quickly. So I was very pleased with that. My only gripe with it at the moment is that the D-pad, as you do these rolling maneuvers, feels bumpy to me. It's not as smooth as I expected it to be, because I've seen some other controllers that replicate this rolling Sega D-pad, and those are a lot smoother than this one. I did ask them about this, and they said it should not be feeling bumpy as you are doing these maneuvers, so perhaps this one is an early release that's a little defective. So you may want to just get it out of the box quickly after you buy it to make sure that yours has a smoother rolling maneuver, because this one definitely doesn't feel as smooth as it should be. So hopefully that's not a production issue here. But other than that, it feels really nice. Now this, of course, is designed for shooters and fighting games. It doesn't have 3D controls, but there is a switch here to determine what the D-pad maps to. So right now we're in D-pad mode here, but you can also put it to the middle position to have the D-pad mirror the left stick, and then the right stick if you move the switch all the way over to the right. To switch modes, you have to hold down the button here. So if you wanted to go from D input to X input, for example, you just hold it down and it will switch modes, and the instructions give you indicators as to what those lights mean. Now on the Dreamcast side, not all games supported the 6-button layout. So if you have some compatibility issues, there is a way to turn these two buttons off here to keep everything working properly. Now it will work directly connected over USB-C. It will also, of course, work with the USB dongle, and of course it works with the original console using the original console dongle. And we did a full test on the live stream a little bit earlier, so I was able to attach my VMU here, and it quickly came to life. The Dreamcast had no idea we were using something made far beyond its original production date back in the late 90s. And I played a little Virtua Tennis with it, which was one of my favorite D-pad games here, and it felt quite nice. In fact, I was having probably one of my best games of Virtua Tennis ever, although in fairness, I hadn't played the game in a while, so maybe I was a little fresh there, which is good. I also hooked it up to another game. This is Ikaruga, or Ikaruga. I don't know how to pronounce it, but many of you will correct me in the comments section. And it also worked out quite nicely. So shooters, fighting games, all of those seem to work pretty nicely here, and it was a very fun experience. I'll show you a modern implementation of it in a minute. And as you can see here also, the games were properly sending over their data to the VMU. What was funny about this VMU is that it's been sitting in my basement for probably 20 years, and I had save games still on it that were probably on its flash memory after I changed out the watch batteries on the back of it. So that was pretty fun just to get the old Dreamcast up and running again. Now, one thing I didn't realize is that this has a rumble motor built in, which was fun because I never had a rumble motor on my Dreamcast controllers. You had to get that add-on separately. Now, I am running it right now on my Mister, and we're playing a little Street Fighter 2, and I've got all the buttons here mapped, so I've got a nice 6-button experience here, and it feels great. So again, great controller for the original Dreamcast, but also if you are emulating the Saturn or the Genesis, it's going to work well on your emulated platform of choice. Now, latency on this controller is quite good, both wired and wireless. I've seen a real improvement over the last year or two across the industry in bringing down the input lag numbers here, and this one scores as fast as some of the fastest ones I've ever tested. So my method is I record the screen at 240 frames per second with my iPhone. I push the button on the controller and see how fast it takes for that button push to get registered on screen. Not the most scientific method, but I've been doing it long enough that I can make comparisons from one controller to the other. And here we got only 7 frames when it was plugged in wired, and 11 frames when it was running wireless with its dongle. So very little latency, you won't notice it, and the best part is that if you're hooked up to the original console on a CRT, it's going to be super, super quick. So very good on the latency front. They do now advertise their latency scores on their new controllers, and this seems to line up with the advertised claim. Now, there is a little bit more input lag on the Nintendo Switch based on how this controller connects. So it doesn't connect over Bluetooth. You have to connect using its dongle or connecting directly to the Switch. And that, of course, means the Switch has to be docked in order for you to use this controller with it. And I found on the Switch that when you're going over USB, there's actually a little more latency than there is when you connect up via Bluetooth wirelessly. And that's just due to the nature of the Switch hardware. So a couple of milliseconds extra are added onto the top there. And I also found that the Switch just overall is a little bit more laggy than modern gaming hardware is. So you will have a slightly more laggy experience on the Switch, but it's pretty much the same as you would see with the Pro controller if it was wired in over the USB port. So not bad, but of course the other platforms are better. So speaking of Nintendo, why don't we take a look at the next controller in our lot here. This is the BattlerGC Pro, which of course is inspired by the Gamecube controller. And just like the original Gamecube controller, you've got your octagonal gated stick here, but these are Hall effect sticks, so they're not subject to drift. And I believe the triggers here are also Hall effect. What's nice about these triggers is that in addition to getting the analog action, there's also a button that will actuate at the end of the push here. So you get that analog stick plus the push, which is important for a GameCube controller, and both of these triggers have that button push at the end. So you get digital and analog in one combined unit there. Both the camera button here and the stick are clickable for modern compatibility. It's got a great D-pad that I think feels close to the original, but is better in the sense that it's a lot more accurate and more fun to use. It's got a nice clicky feel to it as well. And it's just got a nice weight overall. You got your rumble motors in here. The buttons are all in the right place. So again, a very nice reinterpretation of the original. You also have some macro buttons here that you can program. They've got instructions included to show you how to do that. So you can map buttons without having to go into your computer or anything to these buttons down here at the bottom if you wanted to have a faster button push at your fingertips. It connects up over USB-C to compatible consoles. And I found when directly connected, our latency scores were among the fastest I've seen out there. Again, very similar to the Dreamcast controller at 7 directly plugged in and 11 frames on my 240 frames per second test when using the wireless dongle. Retro compatibility was excellent. I hooked it up to my Wii because I don't have a GameCube anymore, but my Wii is a great GameCube. I've got one of the first generation Wiis, and I hooked it up to the top there, as you can see, and I was playing a little Mario Sunshine. That worked without issue. All was good there. I also played a little Wave Race, and I'll fast forward to the gameplay here, and it controlled great on that game as well. So great retro compatibility here. The controls feel excellent. very little lag on board as well, and all was good. On the modern front, I played a little Super Smash Bros. With it. Now, I am not a competitive Super Smash Bros. Player, but the controls felt wonderful to me. I had played it on the prior edition consoles, and it was nice to have a more GameCube style controller to play with, just because the controls have different feels to them. You know, that camera stick feels a little different than the other stick, so it was a little easier to remember what buttons to push, and the muscle memory kind of came back a little bit from my GameCube days. Now, on the Switch, you have two connectivity options. You can use the USB dongle here, or you can switch the controller into Bluetooth mode and connect it up that way. And I would actually suggest you use the Bluetooth option with the Switch. One, it gives you the ability to use it on the Switch when it is not docked, but it also has less lag, and that was something I measured as I was running my 240 frames per second lag test earlier. So good to see that option here, and the Bluetooth latency score on this was the same as it was on my Pro controller. So every bit as good as the Pro controller, but you get a controller that feels like a GameCube. Now, the last one in our haul here is the Hunter, which is designed for the Xbox. This is probably the least visually interesting because it looks a lot like your run-of-the-mill modern Xbox One controller, but this one will work with the original Xbox with the included dongle, which I thought was pretty cool. I was, though, a little confused initially because, and I was thinking in the head of a consumer, because you see compatibility with Xbox on the box here, and typically when you go out and buy a controller, if it says it works with the Xbox, it works with whatever Xbox you might have. This one only works with the Xbox, not the One S or the Series S or X or the 360. It only works with the original Xbox, and that is it, along with your PC and your misters and everything else with the USB dongle that it comes with. But on the original, it works great. You've got your dongle here. It plugs right into the console, and everything comes to life. You got rumble in the controller. It has very low latency like we saw on the other game controllers we looked at. And the most fun part about this project for me was taking my old Xbox, which has been sitting in a bin in my basement for at least 15 years, if not longer. And that Xbox came right back up like nothing ever happened. I picked up my saved game of Burnout Revenge. I stopped playing this game probably in 2006 when the 360 version of this game came out. And my save game was still there on the hard drive. Everything was just exactly as I left it. It was like a time capsule. But it was fun to be able to take that out, and the controller worked really well with it. I didn't see any compatibility issues. It was pretty much a plug-and-play exercise. I had a little bit of confusion about how to get the controller paired up, but beyond that, I was very pleased with how everything felt. The controller itself feels really nice. It's obviously smaller than the original Xbox controllers were, so if you prefer the modern incarnation of Xbox controllers, this one will certainly do that for you. And although it looks normal, it actually has some surprises under the hood. The big one is that it has pressure-sensitive buttons, because the original Xbox would allow you to vary your button pushes to get different reactions out of the game, and this supports that when it's hooked up to the original console. You get your white and black buttons here too, so it is, you know, a pretty 100% compatible kind of controller here. They thought of all the different things that come into play. But it has some other modern features, like the sticks here are Hall effect sticks, so you won't get the drift, and you've got a little better accuracy with those. The triggers, also analog, are also Hall effect too. So you've got all of the modern accoutrements here, a controller that feels modern, and it's fun to go back to your original console and use a controller that just feels more up-to-date and responsive, that works with all of your old games just like the original one does. My only gripe on this one is the D-pad. And I think it comes down to this little plastic lip that's underneath it. The D-pad feels better than the original D-pad did, but I think the lip around it is a little too high, so you just kind of get your finger caught on that. It's not a big deal. There's not a lot of games that play with the D-pad on the original Xbox, and I think I could get used to it, but it was just something that felt a little distracting. But beyond that, it's a really nice controller here that pushes all the buttons for me, literally, and it was really nice to just get my old Xbox up and running again with a controller that wasn't all old and crusty, and it was nice to just get that console booted up again. Now, the only issue with this one for connectivity is that it doesn't support a direct wired connection. I tried plugging it into a whole bunch of stuff and nothing saw it. It would start charging, but nothing would register as a controller being plugged in. So I think this one only works wirelessly, either with the USB dongle here or the Retro dongle. But latency is just as good as it was on the other ones when connected wirelessly. I was getting about 10 or 11 frames on my 240 frames per second test. That was in between button pushes and screen activation. So latency is a non-issue with this one as well. It's just as quick and zippy as the other controllers that we've looked at during this haul. So a good controller. I think it's a nice, comfortable one. You got good rumble motors on it, and again, a modern interpretation for a retro favorite, which is becoming more and more popular once again. So a great thing to get for your old Xbox to breathe some new life back into it. So overall, these are some really fun controllers, and I think if you're a fan of these original consoles, these are definitely worth considering, especially because they work on the consoles that inspired each design, along with your modern PC emulation platforms. So all in, some good stuff here. They do make a few others. I think they have a PlayStation one as well, so check out the links that I've got in the video description to see what else they have to offer. That will do it for this one. Until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.